Welcome back to the Football Fan Fanatics Podcast. Thank you for all the downloads we've had over the last couple of weeks from every corner of the globe. So, wherever you're in the world, welcome. In this episode, Nadine and I will do a quick review of England's opening match against Croatia before moving on to their prospects against Ghana. We'll also be chatting about a range of things, all World Cup related, and we can't wait to bring that to you. So, firstly, let's start with England, Nadine. What were your thoughts on the game and the goals that we saw?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's going to be a quick recap. I never do quick, do I? But I thought Group L really started with a bang, didn't it? And the final scoreline, 4-2 to England, replicated the scoreline from 1966. That's the last time England won the World Cup 60 years ago. So is that an omen or is it just a coincidence? But, you know, James, as an England fan over the years, I really didn't enjoy the first half, even though there were 4 goals scored after the first 45 minutes. And you and I predicted that it'd be lower scoring game. I think I'd said 1-0, you'd said 2-0 overall. But despite the sort of the strong scoreline, I felt it was a cagey and chaotic first half. Defensively, we looked poor and nervous. And Tuchel's assistant, Anthony Barry, I think summed it up well at half-time by describing England's first half as complicated and confusing. I think I couldn't have said it better myself, saying playing long when we should have played it short, playing short when we should have played it long, and not playing through the gaps, which meant England couldn't accelerate their game in the way they'd planned to do, falling back in some fearful patterns. But the second half was one of my favourite spells ever of England playing tournament football. How about you, James? How would you assess the match?
Well, you're absolutely right about mentioning that the two halves were completely different in the nature. Talk about the first. Started really lively, and this is what England fans wanted to see. We wanted to see life, we wanted to see pace on the wings, midfielders running forward with the ball, Harry Kane being alive, being in the box. We saw all those things that we wanted to see. But from a defensive aspect, you're absolutely right. It didn't look like the England of the last 2, 4, 6, 8 years. You know, the Euro 2024, we were really good defensively. Mark Gahey particularly was fantastic, even though he didn't play against Croatia. And when you mention about going long, you're absolutely right. Tuchel and Barry were furious, particularly with Jordan Pickford, who would have known that the game plan was to play short and not go long. And he at times did the opposite of that. He kicked it up long. Croatia defenders won the ball back easily. And it did change the way the game was. And unfortunately for us in that first half, Croatia scored 2 goals and we could have avoided that. However, in the second half, we just went for it. And, you know, as you said, that's something we haven't done in a while. We haven't gone for it. And we had fantastic talent on the bench that we brought on. All really exciting, positive changes from Thomas Tuchel, which is another thing we haven't seen. So I think this is a really, really positive sign for England. I still think there's a lot of weaknesses there. But the good thing is there is time for that to be improved. And if you're ever going to have those weaknesses, the first game is a good time for that.
Yeah.
So
when I was watching the match, I thought this is my kind of football in the second half because we were rampant. And I just felt we had arrived at last. I was just so happy after that 45 minutes. And Jude Bellingham on the night was my favourite player on the pitch. And I think he justified why he'd been given the number 10 shirt ahead of Morgan Rogers. I mean, he came out the second half on fire, showing glimpses of his very best, which I think signalled the start of that dominant spell by England. Thanks in part to the head coach, Thomas Tuchel, who apparently made a speech at the break. I don't think it's a secret because Harry Kane sort of revealed some of the thought processes behind what Tuchel had said to them. And Tuchel said something along the lines of, if we lose our way. And he called for more positivity, for more passion and more attacking freedom, which had the desired effect, didn't it, with that 4-2 win. And with Marcus Rashford coming on to score that 4th goal with a really composed finish, thanks to a brilliant pass by Bukayo Saka. who also was substituted on. And it was really heartwarming and pleasing to see that he got some playing minutes on the clock. Interestingly, James, I don't know if you know this, but England had 20 shots inside the penalty area during the game, which I believe set an Opta record for the most shots inside the penalty area in a single World Cup match since records began in 1966. So that's a nice record to have, isn't it?
Absolutely. And no, Nadine, I didn't know that. So thank you for making me aware of that.
Yeah.
And you touched upon Marcus Rashford there, really interestingly. A lot of individuals who are interested in England, support them, are crying out for him to start against Ghana because of the impact he made when he came on, I should say. Do you think he deserves that start for the goal he scored?
Does he deserve the start? Maybe he should be that super sub that comes on again, actually. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I don't know the state of the hamstring injuries and how players are doing. Anything can happen between now and the actual whistle going in the game against Ghana. But I think he should keep the same formation. It's just offensively, maybe changes should be had. But just going back to Harry Kane, I thought his second goal with that Declan Rice corner headed in by Kane was sublime. I mean, he had so much space and freedom, didn't he? And I think that scoreline would have been high against Croatia if it hadn't been for their goalkeeper. Is it Livakovic? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, Livakovic, yeah.
Yeah, he made a string of saves. I mean, he's currently at Dynamo Zagreb, I think on loan there at the moment. And I thought he kept Croatia in the game, and that scoreline could have been even higher if it wasn't for him. I mean, Modric, when we heard that he was in the lineup, everyone was dreading playing against him again. But actually, you've got to remember, he's 40 years of age now, but he was responsible for the first penalty. He's still plying his trade, isn't he, in Serie A for AC Milan, and he's widely regarded as one of the greatest midfielders of his time and the greatest Croatian footballer in his history. But I was really disappointed in his performance, and I think at 40 he's starting to show that his powers are no longer at the height that they once were.
Absolutely. And we mentioned before the Croatia game about England's real strength being midfield with the likes of Declan Rice, Elliot Anderson and Jude Bellingham. And those three together are an absolute unit in midfield. You've got the tackling ability of both Rice and Anderson, the power that you get from Bellingham. They all just work so well together. And I think regardless of Modric's ability, he is 40, as you said, so he's not going to be able to have the legs to match those three.
Yeah.
And with Harry Kane, he is absolutely integral to England's hopes. If they want to win the World Cup, it is, I would say, mostly down to him staying fit, him staying ready and good to go for the knockouts, because he really is crucial for us. Speaking of the team.
But actually, sorry, because we're both recording this in different countries around the world. So sorry if we're cutting over each other. I'm in India at the moment. James is on holiday in Greece. I'm working while you're on holiday. But yeah, I mean, Declan Rice, I'm currently in love with him, not in a weird way, but it just fills my heart with joy when he goes up to take a corner or a free kick. He's a key part of England's spine, isn't he? Hamstring worry, I don't know whether that is going to be a worry in the game against Ghana. Obviously, he was subbed off, and it'll be interesting to see whether he's fit to play or whether he starts as a substitute. Just before we review the lineup against Ghana and any potential changes, something you mentioned earlier on was about Pickford, and I just want to pick up on that again. Tuchel, you're right, didn't look happy with Jordan Pickford in goal. And I don't think I'm wrong in describing Jordan as a passionate, fiery character figure. But do you think Pickford has more freedom at Everton under David Moyes? Because Tuchel seemed to imply that Pickford should do as he's told. In other words, it's Tuchel's way or the highway. How do you think that's going to go down with someone as fiery and independent as Pickford?
Well, Everton and England, naturally, because of the players they've got available to them, play very different ways of football. Everton look to bring the ball forward, get players around their strikers, Beto, Barry, whoever it may be that's starting. So Pickford has that license to do what he wants. And what he's done at Everton, he deserves that almost. He's the superstar in many ways at Everton, but for England, he's absolutely not. He's a great goalkeeper. He's proven that. But I do just worry a little bit that he's not used to playing out from the back at club level, which is what he needs to do really for England. Whereas those players that you see in big six teams, if you like John Stones, even Ezri Konsa, the way that Emery likes to play at Aston Villa, that they are used to those demands that Thomas Tuchel's now setting. So he's going to have to adapt to that. But again, what I mentioned was that if there's going to be a time to make mistakes or to not quite adopt to what Tuchel's trying to get together, it's going to be now. Many Spanish fans have said they're not overly concerned about their draw against Cape Verde in the first week, and rightly so. They won 4-0 a couple of days ago, because at the start that might be the time where mistakes can happen, but it's about building on that. You look at the last World Cup, Argentina lost against Saudi Arabia in the group stages. They went on to win the whole thing. So listen, I don't think it's a huge concern, but it's something we do need to keep an eye on.
Okay, well, let's put Croatia to bed now, shall we? Can we look ahead now to England versus Ghana? You started to, and then I sort of pulled us back into Croatia. So, yeah.
In terms of England v Ghana, I think we're going to see more or less the same that second half. I hope those players now build on that second half performance, don't make the same mistakes as they did in the first half. Ghana, who we haven't spoken about, narrowly won in the 95th minute against Panama, which was a huge result for them. A must-win game, I think, for them, they felt, given they've got us and Croatia, two really challenging, difficult games, especially that Croatia one after being the last game. They don't want to go into that with no wins, so they did well to win against Panama. But obviously England are a different beast for them, so they're going to have to change the way they approach that game. But for England, it's a time not to panic, a time not to make many changes. And as you said about Rashford not starting, I'd be inclined to agree with that. I think he's shown a lot of times in the past that he can come off the bench and score. He did that in Euro 2022 in the group stages. World Cup 2022. And he did it again against Croatia. So I would keep Anthony Gordon. A few people have criticised him. But if I'm quite honest, it wasn't his fault that he didn't make much of an impact in that first half. He wasn't really involved in the game. It was quite scatterguns, back and forth, Croatia having chances, then England. So I think time is to not panic, to not make many changes, and to keep the team. The only positions I maybe question is that centre-back position. Again, not necessarily because of performances, but more because of fitness. John Stones hasn't played much football, so it might be a good time to rest him, although he's had 6 days to recover. So that's up in the air. What are your thoughts on the team and where we should go with it?
Yeah, I'm with you, actually. I think our main concern has got to be England's defensive setup, and the centre-backs is what's causing me a little bit of concern and worry, and that could be where the changes happen for Tuchel in the setup against Ghana. I think John Stones should stay, and I think it's Konsa who possibly should be replaced by Mark Gahey. John Stones and Ezri Konsa, didn't have the chemistry, did they, that we were hoping for the Croatia game? And I suppose we shouldn't have been too surprised by that because they've had limited time together. But I am slightly concerned by that partnership. I think Tuchel respects Stones' experience, despite him looking a bit rusty and not having a lot of matches under his belt. He didn't get that many at Man City, did he, last season? So I think Mark Gahey will get the nod and step into Konsa's shoes. Saka, I get the impression he's still not 100% fit. I think he's doing individual training. Is that what you've been hearing as well, James?
He's still training with the squad, naturally. He came off the bench in the second half and made a good impact against Croatia, but his minutes definitely will still be managed, and I think we'll see Madueke starting again on that right-hand side.
Yeah, and Madueke I thought was brilliant actually in the last game. So he deserves to have a place in the starting lineup. It's interesting actually because Ghana, I don't know a huge amount about them, but I know they've had mixed results coming into the World Cup. They did have a heavy defeat against Austria, and Mexico got the better of them. But they sit on 3 points with a 1-0 narrow win over Panama, but are second the table. Obviously, their goal difference is not as strong as England's. And defensively, when I looked at the game, they had their woes too to contend with against Panama. So I thought, oh, good, it's not just England. Last time England met Ghana was in 2011, which was held to 1-1 draw, but there's no real meaningful insight, is there, for this upcoming fixture, because it's so long ago, 15 years ago, so we can't really look back into history to see whether that is going to predict the game coming up. The Black Stars, as Ghana are known, they're pragmatic, they have genuine pace and athleticism, particularly in the wide areas. It'd be interesting to get your opinion on that. But what I'm personally looking forward to is seeing Anton Semenyo play for Ghana, formerly at Bournemouth, who was in my fantasy football team, who I don't think I changed all year, and then moved to Man City this year. He's a great winger, can play, I think, wide, can't he, as a midfielder. And he could have played for England, actually, but he made the decision to play for Ghana because he wasn't selected for England's sort of youth lineups at all, has a family ties with Ghana, so opted for them instead. And he's going to be up against some familiar faces in Manchester City. And he seems like a really lovely guy. So he's got great friendships with many of the England squad, but actually he's going to put that to one side and be fiercely competitive. I'm sure he's looking for an upset against England.
He's the man, isn't he, Antoine Semenyo? Ghana are going to create something. You expect it to come from him. I think they've also got some other good attacking options. Fatu came off the bench against Panama. He's on the other side and he had a good impact as well. Obviously, Ayew up front. So Ghana aren't a team to just push aside and say this is going to be a walkover. They do have good players. They're well coached. They got a clean sheet against Panama. So England are going to have to go at it again and think we're going to have to give it everything if we're going to want to win this game. And we hope they do that. And I want to ask you, do you think they will? And if so, by what margin? What's your score prediction, Mel?
Oh, no, I'm not doing any more score predictions, having got it horribly wrong last time.
Just have one. We've got to have an England one. We've got to have an England one.
Oh, God, you're forcing me to think about it. Maybe, well, it depends if Thomas Partey is playing. I mean, I don't want to go into the background there because it's a bit grim, but he's been cleared to attend the World Cup game. He brings experience in central midfield, and I think he could expose the England back line. Maybe 3-1, not quite as exciting as the 4-2. I'm being very optimistic as well. But I think Semenyo is the one that offers the energy and the directness from wider positions. So he's going to be a force to reckon with. What's your score prediction?
I'm quite confident. I think 3-0. I think we're going to get it right defensively this time. And I know I just said about Semenyo being talented, which he is. I don't think Ghana have the same attacking threat that Croatia did. But speaking of attacking threat, the US men's national team have shown an abundance of that. They've been absolutely thrilling to watch. I think they've taken a lot of people by surprise, apart from the Americans who are already very confident going into the World Cup. But I think what makes a World Cup so good, special, and the atmosphere kicking is when the host nations are thriving. All three of them look set to go to the knockout stages: Canada, Mexico, and the US men's national team. I think that plays a massive part in getting the buzz behind the World Cup. They're all doing really well, and particularly the US, the likes of Florian Balogun, Reina, Pulisic. These are really quick, influential attacking players, and they were fantastic again in their second game. What are your thoughts on the US and Mauricio Pochettino and how they're doing?
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? Like you said, when the host countries, in this case we've got 3, are still in with a good chance. Obviously the US have already qualified for the next round already, which is great for them. You just get the buy-in from the country then, and then it elevates the whole World Cup. So I think everyone benefits from it. And the United States came into the tournament with a lot of hype, and I think they've lived up to that reputation. They've made a spectacular start to the World Cup, winning their opening 2 group match stages and looking like one of the most dominant teams in the tournament. So as I've just mentioned, they've already secured a place in the World Cup's knockout round in the next 32, clinching the top spot in Group B with convincing wins over Australia and Paraguay. I looked actually into their history. 1930, I don't remember that. I wasn't born then. I may look old, but not that old, is their highest ranking performance when they reached the semis against Argentina, although got beaten heavily 6-1. And since then, most notably, the USA have reached the quarterfinals in 2002 and then the round of 16 in 2022. So can they go further than that this time round? Their star player, Christian Pulisic, is sidelined with an injury. Sorry if I pronounce his name incorrectly. You're so good at the pronunciations. But they still beat Australia in a 2-0 victory without him. And Christian plays as a winger, and he's an attacking midfielder and also a forward, isn't he? So he's a very flexible player for Serie A in club AC Milan. And I know in March you went to Milan, didn't you? You saw the derby between AC Milan and Inter Milan. And was Christian playing then? Did you see him in action? Did you see how good he was?
I did. I don't think... Look, in the Serie A, the games are played completely differently. It was a cagey 1-0 game. So I didn't quite get to see the talent that he can be. But what we have seen at the World Cup is America flying, scoring 6 goals in their 2 games. You mentioned comfortable wins being Paraguay 4-1 and then 2-0 against Australia. So 6 goals in 2 games, a lot more than people anticipated. And this kind of goes towards my next question about goals in general. There's been a lot more goals than anticipated at the World Cup, many being scored late particularly. So the tournament's 2 most productive scoring periods have both come in the aftermath of the hydration stoppages and the final 50 minutes, including stoppage time. So do you think that has an impact? Do you think the hydration breaks have an impact on goals being scored straight after? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. But late goals have always been a feature, have always been a thing at the World Cup. And approximately 25% of all World Cup goals are scored from 75 or 76 minutes onwards. But I think once 2026 is done and dusted, we'll see the figure shooting upwards even higher than before. I mean, Switzerland is a perfect example of this, with late goals in the game against Bosnia, with Switzerland scoring 4 times after the 70th minute. It's not quite the 75th or 76th, but even so, it makes the point that a lot of goals are being scored towards the end of the game. And with FIFA introducing those hydration breaks, the mandatory ones, around the 22nd minute mark in the first half and the 67th minute in the second mark, supposedly to help players cope with summer conditions across those 3 host countries, I personally think it's been responsible for a glut of goals in the final period of that second half, because those breaks provide managers and coaches with a chance to adjust the shape of the team. It's a tactical reset. Those 3-minute hydration breaks give you ample of time, don't they, James, with your players to reinforce plans or change tactics. So those goals, that goal fest, is not only down to the hydration breaks, but also defenders are unsurprisingly exhausted in the last 15 minutes. They become stretched. Spaces suddenly become open. They appear when they were blocked before. So I think it's a combination of the two. Wouldn't you say that's fair?
I absolutely would. And when talking about the hydration breaks, I think, yes, they are good in terms of allowing managers to reinforce tactics or explore new tactics. However, they do change the momentum of the game. And I think a most recent example of that was last night between Belgium and Iran. Just a few minutes before the hydration break in the second half, Belgium went down to 10 men. And Iran were creating chances. They had a good shot from Taremi, saved by Thibaut Courtois, only for the hydration break to come. And that opportunity was there for Belgium to reinforce defensive tactics. And then what we saw after the hydration break was Belgium on top and the game being quite back and forth, as opposed to Iran carrying that momentum from the sending off. So in that regard, I think they're quite unpopular. They break the momentum of the game. And as I mentioned in the last episode, FIFA have been crying out to increase the momentum of games and reduce the time of the ball being off the pitch. But these hydration breaks do not help with that. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if they carry on with these hydration breaks. Do you see a future of them? Do you think this is the way now forever?
Yes and no. And actually, apologies if you broke up a little bit then. As I said, you are in Greece at the moment on holiday. We caught most of that, but they're not very popular, are they, the hydration breaks? I mean, the sound of booing when they happen is obvious to hear. They're meant to prevent the effects of heat. But as we just discussed, the hydration breaks are helping to create the conditions for goals as well. And the mandatory hydration breaks have effectively chopped matches into 4 quarters, leading to a loss of momentum and the pattern of play being broken. Are they in reality a disguise for commercial advertising on US TV? I mean, hydration breaks are conveniently 3 minutes long. And actually, my mate, Alan Newton, who's also an Evertonian, like you, James, who you've met before a couple of times, has just written a piece about the hydration breaks on LinkedIn. And in his post, Alan said it feels far more like a format change optimised around ad inventory than around the flow of the game, especially when the UK broadcasters have avoided the temptation to turn these pauses into ad breaks, with a beautiful game annoyingly reshaped during this World Cup. And many fans I know hate it and have made their feelings known in the stadium. Whether or not you believe FIFA's welfare narrative, the commercial incentives are obvious. The pauses create neat little windows for broadcasters and sponsors. So, James, I think it's difficult to justify hydration breaks, especially in those air-conditioned stadiums if you're playing at games in Dallas, Houston or Atlanta in the US, where some of the commentators have been talking about wearing jumpers because it's so chilly in there, when outside it's 35 degrees and more. But interestingly, UEFA have already said that for the Euros in 2028, hydration breaks will only kick in when temperatures exceed 35 degrees Celsius, so that's 95 degrees in Fahrenheit. But judging by the current heat wave in France, Spain and Morocco, hydration breaks could actually happen at every game in 2 years' time because it's so hot at the moment. So that 35 degree factor would kick in.
Well, that's really interesting. And we were speaking about added time and thinking it would be really high as a result of these hydration breaks. But it's actually been surprisingly low. Sometimes we've only seen 5 or 6 minutes going up in the second half, which is really, really interesting. And also, we've seen a stick come out the other day that the ball in play has actually gone up by a few more percent than it has done in previous World Cups. So beside the hydration breaks, do you think we're seeing a lot of positive change?
Yes, I think so, because actually I think we thought the board would say 12 to 15 minutes of added time. But in fact, we're seeing a much more modest, say 5 to 6 minutes in total, which I think surprised you and I, especially you, because you predicted that games would actually end up lasting for a lot longer, which would be really tiring for the players, particularly those players not in those air-conditioned stadiums. So I think that has been pleasantly surprising. But I think FIFA have been really on top of those changes to make sure that, people are penalised if they don't allow the game to flow. So whether it's throw-ins or whatever, things have to happen quick and fast. So I've been pleasantly surprised that the game has been a lot quicker despite those hydration breaks.
And in talking about new rules, new regulations, one of the new rules that FIFA introduced for this World Cup was the covering of players' mouths, and that being a red card offence. And we saw Miguel Almiron being sent off for covering his mouth, which is the first time we've ever seen it at a World Cup. And the players didn't seem to complain about it too much. The referee went to the VAR monitor, reviewed the incident and sent the player off. So what's your opinion on that incident?
Well, I think it's going to be an excellent sporting quiz question in the future. I can see quiz masters all around the world asking which player or country were the first to be shown a red card at a World Cup match for a player covering up his mouth. And clearly, if you cover your mouth, referees have been told to work on the presumption that players have said something they shouldn't have. Everyone knew about this new rule, so I'm not surprised that actually the referee acted on it. And Almiron used to play for Newcastle, didn't he? And he's apologised to his teammates for putting them in the situation of being down to 10 men, although despite that red card, Paraguay still actually beat Turkey, who actually as a nation haven't given a great account of themselves so far at the World Cup. So it looked like Turkey might be heading out. But going back to that new law, if you cover your mouth, you'll get a red card and you will be sent off. And I think that red card was inspired by the Benfica Champions League game against Real Madrid in February, when Gianluca raised his shirt when confronting Vinicius Jr. Originally, he was charged with racist abuse, which Gianluca denied, and he was provisionally banned for one match. But following a UEFA investigation, he was actually found guilty of a hideous homophobic slur, which he actually admitted to, and was banned for much longer than the original one-match suspension. So I think it's a really good law, and I can see this filtering down into other leagues around the world, and I think it's a good thing. I welcome it.
And when speaking about Turkey as well, particularly in that game, as we mentioned, Paraguay were down to 10 men. It happened right at the end of that first half. So Turkey had a real opportunity to get themselves back in the game, to revive their World Cup hopes. Opta have said that they've attempted 62 shots in those two games, but failed to score in either of them, which is a crazy statistic to be honest. Yeah. They're out of the World Cup now, Turkey, and they're really disappointed, and as they should be. Some people had them as their dark horses. I think, well, every World Cup, people seem to have Turkey as their dark horses, but really, really disappointing. Do you think Turkey needs a complete look into their football identity, their brand, what they need to do, or is it just a simple situation of changing the manager?
Possibly changing the manager. In truth, I hadn't given it much thought at the moment, but I just did expect them to do so much better. You've got some, great players there, and I just think there are other teams in the world who have now come up and surpassed them. The African nations, the likes of Morocco, are now taking the place of the likes of Turkey. So I don't think I'm best placed to answer that. I haven't looked into it deeply. I mean, I'd be more interested in your thoughts than mine.
Yeah, well, what I will say is Turkey, there's a lot of excitement about some of the attacking players they have in Kenan Yildiz and Arda Güler, both playing for Juventus and Real Madrid, respectively. So Turkey had expectation, and against a team like Paraguay, I think people expected them to win. Individuals expected them to win, especially Turkish supporters. They really expected them to at least progress to the round of 32, and they haven't done that. And rightly so, it's really disappointing. And actually, what's really interesting is some were questioning, hold on, surely Turkey can still go through because they can get their goal difference and finish third. But there's a new rule now, which FIFA have introduced, which again is interesting. And it's to say that head-to-head goes above goal difference. So if you've lost to that team, but you have a better goal difference than them, it doesn't matter because they've beat you in that head-to-head game. Do you think that's a way forward in maybe, say, the Premier League, if there was ever a situation where two teams were both level on 70 points, but one had beaten the other twice? Do you think that's something to consider above goal difference?
Yeah, I definitely think it is, because you've got to have some sort of measurement which can separate two teams up. So I'm all up for that. I like that kind of innovation. So I'd welcome that, not only in the Premier League, but other leagues around the world. And again, I'm sure it will filter down. If FIFA are setting it here at the World Cup, it's likely, although UEFA have gone against the grain and tried to, make differences very public about what they're going to be doing in a couple of years' time in comparison to what UEFA seem to like to be going out the way to saying, look, we're a bit different from FIFA. But actually on this particular rule, I think it will be welcomed whatever the competition is.
I have to agree with you, Nadine. You mentioned Morocco previously before in regard to how well they've done as well. Against Scotland, they were ahead inside 70 seconds. And they obviously took the lead against Brazil, got a point against them. And for the rest of the first half, Morocco were fantastic. They were unlucky to only be 1-0 up. Scotland obviously rallied on in the second half, but couldn't break down Morocco. So what do you think that defeat does for Scotland? And in regard to Morocco, do you see them doing as well as they did in the last World Cup and getting to the semi-finals?
I hope so, because I'm just a big fan of Morocco. And, Sepp Blatter, when he was in charge of FIFA and he had a lot of doubters, he was very keen for the African continent to have its moment of glory and to try and put a spotlight on that. So teams like Morocco justify that point of view. And Morocco were far better than Scotland. I think restricting Scotland to no efforts on target. I missed the goal. I can't believe it. I was just heading up to bed. I was going to watch it in bed. And in the time I walked up the stairs to turn the TV on in my bedroom, I could sense a goal had been scored, and I thought, oh no, I've just missed it. So I did feel really sorry for Scotland because they brought the party to Boston. I've been to see the Red Sox play, and I think a whole load of the Tartan Army had been down there to watch the baseball and had delighted the audiences by singing all sorts of wonderful Scottish songs and really getting the city in the mood. I mean, obviously, Scotland do have the 3 points behind them, so it's not all over just yet, but it does put their qualification in jeopardy, but they could still go through in that sort of third place. So it's still to play for, but it's an uphill battle, I think.
It's definitely still to play for, and what they've got to hope is that they do get that third place spot, and that's probably realistic. Brazil obviously on 4 points, so their qualification, well, in terms of getting to the round of 32 is probably guaranteed, but for their own perspective, they want to finish top of their group to get themselves the best possible game in the round of 32 and build confidence. So they'll want to win that game against Scotland too. So it's going to be really, really difficult.
But also, Brazil looked convincing in the second game, whereas they looked nervous in the first one. So, unfortunately, Scotland are facing Brazil possibly at the worst time.
Look, these are still world-class talents with the likes of Vinicius Junior. Rafinha's not even really got kicking yet for Brazil, and obviously with Carlo Ancelotti, a world-class manager. Scotland have an uphill battle to climb against them. But I wouldn't count them out either. I think they can make the game ugly for Brazil and make it difficult. And even England fans, I have friends that I've spoken to who would have said that they'd love to see Scotland progress, just to see the Tartan Army out there for a few more weeks, maybe even a month, if they can do something really unexpected, getting to quarters, semis, even a final. And speaking of unexpected, there's just been such an unexpected element to this World Cup, which I think has made it really, really special. Having 48 teams prior to the World Cup kicking off, many saw it as a money-grabbing technique from FIFA. They saw it as unnecessary. They thought there'd be a lot of dead rubber games. But as a matter of fact, it's led to some unbelievable stories, particularly with Curacao and Cape Verde. Cape Verde, the other day, they drew 2-2 against Uruguay. Sorry, when I say the other day, last night as we record this, and they were absolutely fantastic. And they won the game 3-2 at the end. They gave Uruguay a fantastic game. It was back and forth. It was like two big hitters, not a really small nation. So do you think that this new format is really beneficial? Because right now it looks it.
I don't know. Although, if you're the likes of Cape Verde, then yes, you're going to say it's beneficial because it's giving countries like that an opportunity to take part in one of the greatest tournaments there is in the world. There are so many people that are into football. It's the most popular game in the world. So I love it from that point of view. But I still think there's potentially more mediocre games as a result of having that expanded format. So I'm not necessarily convinced at the moment. Ask me that again at the end of the tournament. But I think Cape Verde has made a sensational debut in Group H, as you said, earning 2 draws against football giants Spain and Uruguay, giving them 2 points so far, and keeping their chances of advancing to the knockout stages wide open in the tournament. I think they were lucky to play Spain first up when Spain weren't at the height of their tournament powers. But Cape Verde showed, as you said, that they had backbone when they salvaged a well-deserved point against the South American heavyweights to make that game 2-2. But as you said, they could have possibly won that. Cape Verde still have Saudi Arabia to play in their final group stage game. And on paper, that should be easier for them in comparison to, say, Spain and Uruguay. And again, how do you pronounce? Is it Curacao? Curacao, okay. Yeah, I'd never heard of that place actually before, so I'm not used to saying it. But they made their debut at the World Cup, and Curacao have earned, I think, 1 point in the 2 matches in Group E. They suffered a real dispiriting 7-1 opening defeat to Germany, but still managed to score their first ever goal, which I think gave them, a lot to celebrate. And then the game that followed, which we expected them again to suffer a heavy defeat, was actually a 0-0 draw against Ecuador. They are the smallest nation by both population and area to qualify, and their men's national football team is currently ranked 82nd in the world. So realistically, we can't expect too much from them, but it's something they can build on. So good luck to them. But, I'd be surprised if they get much further than what they've have done so far.
Well, I think the fact that both those nations in Cape Verde and Curacao can make it to the round of 32 if they win their games is really special. Eloy Room, the Curacao goalkeeper, made 15 saves against Ecuador, which is going to be seen as one of the greatest goalkeeping performances ever in the World Cup, particularly if they do end up going through. So I didn't think I would have said this before the World Cup, but I'm really going to be keeping my eye on those two sides, with Cape Verde playing Saudi Arabia and Curacao playing Ivory Coast in the final round, because I wouldn't put it past them to win those games and do something really, really special. And speaking of, new teams, new technology, the ball that they're using in the World Cup is packed with loads of technology. Really interestingly, the Trionder is a smart ball, which means it's AI enabled, and it contains a little special sensor in it. And as it moves around the pitch, this ball will be gathering data from sensors placed all around the stadium that track every movement of the ball. This is a really interesting and new concept. Do you welcome this sort of innovation?
Yeah, I do. Obviously, I've presented programmes for CNBC all about AI and the Internet of Things, and AI gets such a bad reputation. Can't help but sort of seeing stories every day, dupe merchants. But I think it's being used for good effect here, with AI collecting loads of useful data about the game. It's packed with connected ball technology, whatever that means, and it features a suspension system housing a 500 hertz motion sensor chip that tracks every movement, every kick and touch at an astonishing rate of 500 times per second. So that 500 hertz means 500 cycles per second. And in essence, what that means is that we get extra data, fans get extra data, the officials get extra data, and we can find out which goal had the most spin, what was kicked the hardest or travelled the fastest. And it's a really good, innovative system introduced by FIFA in collaboration with Adidas. And as you said, it involves embedding advanced sensors within the match ball to provide precise, real-time data about its movement and position. And I think where it really is good, and that's why I think the decision-making has been quicker than we thought it would be, it enhances decision-making, this technology, particularly for video assistant referees, VARs, by offering extremely detailed insights into ball dynamics, such as the exact moment of contact, for offside determinations and speed and trajectory information. So I think it plays a pivotal role in semi-automated offside decisions and other critical match incidents. And I think that ensures greater accuracy and fairness in today's game, and also the speed as well. I think this has been useful and helpful in making sure we don't have loads of additional added time. And sometimes you think, well, has it been tested properly? And it has been. There was a series of stadium tests that were carried out between 2020 and 2022 to ensure the accuracy of the connected ball data and smooth integration with the VAR systems. So I think that extensive testing confirmed that the lightweight sensor doesn't alter the ball's performance, weight or balance, which I think is the most important thing, because if it had done that, then I wouldn't be such a big fan of this new innovation. How about you? Do you like the idea of it?
What I find really interesting is you mentioned the dynamic of the ball and the movement. Joe Hart for the BBC did a piece of analysis about the ball and how it moves in the air. Jordan Pickford, with the first goal that he conceded against Croatia, got his hand to the ball, but he slightly timed it too early. We saw that again with Messi scoring his first goal against Algeria. The goalkeeper just timed it early. And so perhaps we're seeing a little bit of a repeat of the 2010 ball in South Africa, the Jabulani, which many people didn't welcome because it had crazy movement. It saw crazy goals. So in that regard, I'm a little bit skeptical about it and whether it's impacting the movement of the ball, because it does seem to be jagging about a little bit. So it'll be really interesting to see if we see more goals like this or whether the goalkeepers get used to it. Obviously, I'm not sure you are aware of that and the ball and there being a pattern of it moving in the air and the keepers not getting used to that. I think it's a lot lighter than the Premier League balls. So that might be the difference. So if that does have a correlation between the technology they're using and the ball, the pattern of the ball and the air changing, then I do think that is a worry. Would you not agree?
Possibly, but I think they've done the extensive tests, and maybe it's something else about the ball design that is causing those movements. I mean, you mentioned a couple of incidents with Pickford and Messi, but no, I haven't heard anybody mention that at all. But that's interesting, because that's the first time I've heard you talk about it, and that wasn't on my radar, but it will be now. But I don't think, although hand on heart, I can't be 100% sure, I don't think that's down to the AI technology. It gets a bad rep anyway, but I don't think we can blame that on that. And do you think Pickford is using that as an excuse, or Joe Hart is using that as an excuse to blame the sensor as opposed to the overall ball design? Maybe the criticism should be about the ball design as opposed to the AI sensor.
Well, listen, we're going to be a lot. We're going to see a lot more talk about the AI sensors, VAR technology, and so much more to come. This World Cup's only really just getting started. But thank you, Nadine, for joining me, and thank you for listening to this week's Football Fans Fanatics podcast. Whether you're following the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or whether you listen online, please do give us a follow and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, Football Fan Fanatics. Thanks again, and see you next time.